So Trump-Putin meeting happened, and it seems it didn't give any substantial results. However, it still produced something. And you may find yourself very disoriented in the vast sea of information that you can consume online. So I just want to go and show you how I would make, as a professional in international relations, my own analysis of this meeting. And I'm a very big fan of closed readings of press releases and press statements. And if you actually go and read news, which, to be frank, I haven't done in a while, so I actually try to avoid reading news from famous media outlets because they all have a certain specific bias. And as an expert in U.S.-Russia relations, I always strive to read first and foremost primary sources. And in this case, if you think what constitutes a primary source, it is the joint news conference by Putin and Trump. And let's just do together a close reading so you can see how you can actually analyze world events and specifically US-Russia relations without, just consuming some biased information that you find online. So, and if you go and read, the news conference statement, a few things that catch, for example, my attention. So let me start just by showing how, like, seemingly Putin, after this meeting, really wants to establish a certain way forward with Americans that is beyond animosity. And you can see it in many different ways. But for example, he starts, his press conference by basically saying that Russia and the U.S. are actually neighbors. And of course, it is a very important message to understand because what he tries to say that no matter past difficulties, Russia and the US must find a way of a peaceful coexistence. Since Russia and the US are actually neighbors, there is no way to escape it. And in this form, of course, it is a very polite way to kind of sell either friendship or some sort of realignment to the United States. So this is the first thing that catches my attention. The second thing is, of course, his allusion to past alliance with the United States, specifically during the World War II. And Putin, does it on many different occasions when he talks about relationship with the U.S. He often tries to kind of resurrect uh, past friendship in order to establish a new one. And I think it makes sense because like historical narratives, they certainly have a profound impact on human mind, and they certainly have a profound impact on how people can frame this or that type of international relationships. So here, of course, he refers to, and basically it repeats that the United States and Russia fought together Nazism, and this way he wants to demonstrate that U.S.-Russia relations, again, they are not doomed to fail, so to speak. They are not doomed to just be bad. In other words, so they can be rather good instead. Um, and so if we specifically talk about U.S. If you specifically talk about Ukraine and the war in Ukraine, I would say nothing really happened. Of course, during this negotiation process. What I would assume that they just exchanged their opinions and views, and in this way, of course, the summit was really important. So Putin himself, could deliver what he considers to be, Russian key security concerns, what he considers to be Russian core objectives in this war. So you ask, take this into account rather than to act upon some act upon imaginary Russian goal pursuits, Russian war pursuits, and so on and so forth. So in this sense, of course, Putin basically says that yeah, he conveyed Russian security interests, and he also underscored that the deep root of the conflict must be solved. And I think I will keep this for another video explaining the deep root of the conflict. But here I just want to briefly mention that in general in the West, people have tremendous troubles understanding what Russia wants to achieve in this war. And spoiler alert, it's not just to grab as much Ukrainian land or to conquer the whole Ukraine. Of course, Russian interests are way much more ambitious, are way much more abstract than that. And just I would say briefly, they are about changing the European security architecture. And of course, I would definitely assume that in this meeting, he strongly conveyed to Trump that any any agreement between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States, potentially European Union and other intermediaries, uh, should involve the abandonment of like Ukrainian NATO aspirations. Or in other words, either United States itself or United States allies or Ukraine itself should unequivocally um, unequivocally say that it won't become part of NATO. So this is important to keep in mind. And in this joint statement, he basically openly says about it. Not openly, but it's something that you can see it is implied when he says about that. Um, when he says about the understanding of deep roots of this conflict, um, the root causes of this crisis. Um, and um, Of course, an interesting point was made by Putin when he said that he hopes that neither European countries nor Ukraine would try to derail this process. And this is something, of course, to keep in mind. In my previous video, when I made certain predictions before the summit, I said that there is no way to escape, of course, like Ukrainian agency in this particular question, because there can be no peace without Ukrainian participation. Or in other words, peace cannot be made um, just by like enforcing peace on Ukraine, and it especially becomes true when Ukraine gets certain type of support from European Union, be it moral support, military support, or any other type of support. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. Um, of course, something that you probably read it online. He also alluded to kind of business interests of Mr. Trump, and he tried in general to say that Russia and the United States have great economic potential, and he hopes that their like the improved relationships would lead to this material exchange. So, and I mean, and of course, what also he said, I mean, publicly, and he alluded to it also already previously, that he also believes, like Trump said repeatedly, that if Biden hadn't been the president, then probably the war would have been avoided. And I made actually um, entire video on this topic, and it's something that's very interesting. Of course, it is very simplistic argument to say that just because of Biden, the war happened. But of course, one thing to keep in mind, I think it's genuinely true to say that Biden significantly um, amplified the escalatory dynamic between Russia and the United States and Russia and Ukraine. So in this sense, it's just an interesting that he mentioned this in this press in this joint statement. I mean, just no, it's not a statement. Sorry, it's joint press conference. And what also caught my attention brief how brief Trump responded. His answer, his statement was basically very brief and short, um, and basically saying that he needs now to. He basically says that he takes now Russian position, and he will go and consult with European and NATO allies in order to see where they can go from there. And I mean, basically, he doesn't say nothing much. So about that, and last things to I guess notice how Putin invites him to Moscow for the next summit, and Trump I think politely rejects this option, but we'll see. Um, so this was my analysis of a close reading, I would say, of the only primary document that we have from this meeting. Apart from like the spectacular imagery of Trump and Putin in Alaska, and you probably saw those type of images everywhere on the internet. So it was indeed like a very interesting meeting. I mean, and if I were to give you just a few thoughts about where this will go from where this meeting leads, I'm still just from the information I've seen about this meeting, and also given just joint statement. I think we can't really expect much going into the future. It seems that they definitely exchanged views and ideas. So hopefully now American side has a better understanding of what Russia really wants. Of course, in those very high level meetings, presidents can be very frank with each other, and they can exchange information freely, and of course this creates a certain in both mutual understanding and also mutual understanding. But of course it doesn't necessarily mean that this mutual understanding will lead to anywhere. I mean, what important to keep in mind is what actually America wants from Russia, which in this case is actually way much more important than what Russia wants from the US. So let me know what you think about the summit in the comments. Like my video. I will upload more frequently in on this YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the next one.